Hey guys, so a lot of you may have noticed that I just kinda stopped doing content on The Division and may be wondering why. I mentioned it a little bit in my update video, but I just wasn't having a ton of fun with the game at the time. Well, myself, Arekkz Gaming, Bife, Mtashed, and SkillUp.gg recently did a podcast on our thoughts on the state of the game from varying perspectives, ranging from the super hardcore to the not as hardcore. We talked about a lot of stuff. Obviously, there were some things that we couldn't get to just because of time, but I think we did all right at explaining, most of what's going on. Marco Style NL, one of the leading Division YouTubers, just recently put out a video on the Division's state of flux right now, and it was a very good listen. That video is in the description, along with everyone else's information. I highly recommend checking out Marco Style's video. It was very, very good. SkillUp.gg does a lot of good stuff for the Division. He's also a theory crafter, so he's like me in that he likes working with numbers and stuff and getting into the nitty-gritty, so if you're still active on the Division, he's definitely a great person to go subscribe to. Anyway, I'm going to shut up. Here's the podcast.
Hello and welcome, it's Skill Up here. Today I have some amazing guests to talk about the current state of the Division. Obviously the game is very much in flux at the moment. Patch 1.1 has landed and it hasn't received a spectacular reception. So we've got some people here that obviously have played a lot of the Division, have played a lot of other games, and have some really successful and fantastic YouTube channels. So I'm going to introduce them now, or I'll at least give them the opportunity to introduce themselves. So first up we have Arekkz.
How's it going, guys? Yes, my name's Arekkz, or from the Arekkz Gaming YouTube channel. Cover a wide variety of games, but obviously primarily Division. Division, Destiny, and Monster Hunter are the main three. And of course, Division is like the big thing right now. So yeah, that's me. Guides, walkthroughs, news, all that stuff.
Awesome,
yeah.
Awesome. Cheers, Arekkz. And next up, we have a gentleman by the name of Mtashed.
Hey, I'm second on the list. Wow, honored. I'm a random YouTuber that does Destiny, Division content. For the most part, I just do guides when they're really needed on stats or like how to beat the Incursion when it first comes out, and then I pander off into random comedy videos that aren't really funny.
In Scottish accents.
Yeah, randomly.
We need to make sure the Scottish accents features into this somehow. We need that.
That's going to be great. I love that.
There it is, right there.
No,
okay, cool.
It's
Within
terrible.
the first
It's
2 minutes. It's just the best. Speaking of gentlemen, we have a guy by the name of My Name is Bife.
Hi, my name is Bife. I do Destiny and Division, and for the most part it's news content, but I'm also a lover of the story, so I do lore, I do machinima as of a few days ago, and also when it comes to the Division, I'm looking for primarily a solo player's perspective, and to help people out, no matter what that is.
Awesome. Thanks, Bife. And finally, we have the Datto.
You started to say gentleman, and I was like, okay, it's not coming to me next.
No, that's right. So I didn't introduce you as a gentleman. You were just the Datto. You just got a the prefix, man. That's what you get.
So I primarily cover Destiny. I've been dabbling in some other things. Division first came out, and I definitely wanted to hit up that, but people definitely know me for Destiny exclusively.
Right. Awesome. All right. Well, cool. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I think it's going to be a really great discussion at a really, I think, critical time for the game, because obviously the Division came out with a huge splash. It was the most successful IP launch in Ubisoft's history. Topped all the charts, huge hype, and then the journey from that point on to now has been very interesting to watch. So really interested to maybe kick off from that point and maybe say, we'll start with alphabetically, Arekkz. What are your general sort of thoughts on how you've enjoyed the game over the last sort of like 6 weeks since it's launched? Are you still playing? Take us away.
So, I mean, generally speaking, I'm really enjoying myself. It's a game that I've been covering for 3 years now. I covered it basically since it was announced. So I kind of put a lot of eggs in one basket, kind of building up to that point, thinking kind of how I did with Destiny. I pre-covered it for a while. But yeah, it came out, really enjoyed it. I've clocked probably 12 days of playtime so far. I still play it every single day. Sure, I appreciate, of course we'll cover this throughout the discussion. I appreciate the state of the game right now. There are some issues and some things like that, but ultimately the majority of those aren't impacting my experience too much. So for the most part, I'm still enjoying it. I get a lot of enjoyment in the dark zone, probably as well, I find, because I have I've got a solid team of people that I play with. So as with a lot of games, probably you guys find the same kind of thing as well. With a lot of games, if you're playing with friends, then generally speaking, it makes everything a lot more fun. So maybe if I was playing solo, I might have had a slightly different perspective. But yeah, currently, I'm super happy with. I definitely appreciate that. I think it's in a place where, kind of like how when Destiny came out, went to vanilla as well, that it's got to grow, right? It's a game as an experience. It's a game as almost a game like a service. So it's definitely what we have right now is not what we're going to have, say, 6 months down the line. But yeah, I think it's definitely got off to a great start. I think they've also got a lot to learn from, a lot to improve and stuff. But yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Sure. And Mtashed, I noticed you actually put up a video today on this very subject. So yeah, what are your thoughts? How have you sort of found it?
So I made the comment, and I put it in quotations, that the Division is dead. Not period. Not the game is dead for everyone, but for me. I personally don't enjoy the game anymore for a few various reasons, and it's not even necessarily the way the game was created or what there is to do in the game. It's actually a lot to do with people exploiting the game. I feel like I'm behind now. So when I started out, I started to grind pretty hard because I wanted to make guides. It was fun for me. I could go in the dark zone. I could compete against other players, and it felt great. Then as the bugs started to go, I refused to exploit them just because, A, I didn't want to shoot the same boss over and over again for 8 hours, but I just didn't want to be part of it. And then as the incursions came out and people were getting the challenge mode done using this glitch, and now getting the 240 armor score gear, getting way better rolls on their gear, maxing out with set gear, it came to the point where now one of my favorite things to do, which was PvP, I can't even go in the dark zone now. I get absolutely dominated. They will kill me in fractions of a second because their gear is so min-maxed at this point because of their ability to grind, get materials, and now craft, that I can't catch up. So I like to min-max. I like games like Diablo. I love stats. It's very fun for me. But when I now can't compete with those stats, no matter how much knowledge I have, I can't really catch up. It kind of hurts. So I almost want to wait until the next expansion for them to change things. So hopefully we can all be on even ground and really dive back into the game, because I love the skills. I love the game overall. It's just right now I don't have any drive to play.
Sure. For sure. And what about you, Datto? I know that you obviously sort of came into the Division quite strong and have obviously been playing less of it now due to the Destiny update. But overall, how have you found it since launch?
I'm in a mainly similar boat as Mtashed. PvP not really my forte at all. It's not the main reason why I want to play the game. I wanted to play the game because it was, I enjoyed that kind of Diablo experience, that loot grinder experience. When I first played the Incursion, we had just done a challenge mode in Destiny, and we were all kind of frustrated, and the Incursion was not exactly our idea of fun. Like, getting rushed by 7 shotgun dudes was not the greatest feeling in the world. Granted, I don't think we were geared enough. I thought we were pretty decently well geared, most of us being in all high-end gear and mainly item level 31 stuff, but we just didn't really find the Incursion particularly thrilling. And I know I had been cutting down on my Division time around, probably about a week and a half to 2 weeks in, when I realized, the Dark Zone was having a lot of issues. There was only the same 4 challenge modes, one of them being Russian Consulate, which is a whole other fun thing in itself. Learning that was a fun time, to say the least. But I put out a video on like some problems that I had with the Dark Zone, which were just, there were a lot of issues that was just, I was like, why am I even grinding at this point? I just wanted to hit level 50 in the Dark Zone and then just be done. And I was like, okay, I've now finally hit level 50 in Dark Zone. Now I can buy all these blueprints. And then I bought all the blueprints, and then they announced that they're like changing everything. So I was like, I just spent 400 Phoenix credits on these blueprints, and now everything's getting changed. So
why can't they just keep this stuff the same, man? What's going on with that?
No, I mean, to be fair, it definitely needed to change. It was just kind of it was just really bad timing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I just, I didn't enjoy the loot grind, because the loot grind is supposed to be about, getting a bunch of really cool items and trying to figure out your gear sets. And what ended up happening was I was just getting a whole bunch of crap items all of the time. Upgrades were very, very rare. And unless you played a lot, crafting was kind of expensive, and they made it even more expensive now. Division tech was obviously a huge problem. So I just didn't really feel any incentive to go and play. I didn't find it particularly fun. The Incursion I didn't really find too enjoyable. I guess I don't really know what I was expecting. A lot of people were maybe expecting a sort of Destiny-like raid experience, and I was like, I don't think we're really gonna get that. But I wasn't too thrilled with the Incursion. It was just kind of boring to me, and it was kind of frustrating. And plus, on top of all these, these exploits and these glitches, now I don't even want to dare set a foot into the Dark Zone. I do want to give the Division another shot. I haven't had time with the Destiny update coming out and various betas being here for a limited amount of time. So it's a combination of not having enough time and not really wanting to get back into the game is what kind of slowed me down.
Totally. And Bife, where are you at on this spectrum, man? What do you think?
Well, I have to echo a lot of what's been said by both Tash and Datto. I've not really been enjoying my experience as of late. When the game launched, I had fun with it. I thought, you know what, even though this doesn't feel like exactly what I expected from the Division, it's still something that's quite robust. I grinded my way to level 30. I grinded my way through to getting a full set of high-end. I grinded quite a lot of Dark Zone, but the thing about me as a player which somewhat may differentiate myself slightly is that I don't always run in a pack. I'm someone who instinctively loves to play solo, and a lot of the stuff that Mtashed is talking about with regards to the Dark Zone changes and the fact that people are going one of these really high-level sets, and a lot of what Datto was saying with regards to how the Incursion has been changing the game, on both those sides, for me as a solo player, it means that it disincentivizes me from playing the game. Now, I'll openly admit, the 1.1 update, the quality of life changes that they made, aside from some crafting material changes that, admittedly there was a little controversy while they were still not getting fixed, that stuff for me it's the real victory of this update. But even with that, and the stuff that it does to potentially support solo players, I don't see myself playing the Division as much or enjoying it as much, because, again, as Mtashed says, every time you go into the Dark Zone, I don't have any stuff that's part of, the Striker's battle gear or whatnot. I don't have something that's a Sentry's Call set of gloves that's going to give me an exceptionally large amount of extra damage. I don't have any of this gear. I'm sticking with my current high-ends, and I am behind. So, for me, the entire experience has just sort of devolved from there. The people who have gone ahead and exploited, I take a very similar position to you again there, Tash, where I don't jump in and exploit those glitches because it's an exploit. It's not the way the game is made to be played. So unless you're doing something fundamentally different with it and you're being creative or, you're adding to the experience of the game, I don't see a reason to use it. For me, that's what's really sort of deterred me from any of the things that have been going on in the Division where you can go outside the map and get to Falcon Lost and kill the APC without even engaging an enemy. For me, that's what I'm sitting at currently with the Division.
Sure.
And, I'll sit down and I'll do my daily hard mode missions. A challenge mode mission and soloing it is, aside from being, oh God, Datto brings up Russian consulate. I have to echo that, my God. Aside from them being a little bit ridiculous, I have to sit back and think, what for me as a solo player does this game really offer? I can try and solo the Dark Zone and it's fun when it works, but when it works is the key part of that sentence. I can't do incursions. The daily story missions have the same problem as the daily story missions in any game that makes you repeat the levels, which is eventually they get boring unless the loot's good. And even with the loot grind, with all of the new stuff out there that's inaccessible to me, for the most part, the game has just sort of dropped off in terms of reasons that I should be playing.
Before we continue, anyone that's listening, I just want them, I just hope it makes sense what we're saying, and we're not saying, don't play this game, the game is dead, it sucks. We all have had fun at this point. We've really enjoyed it. We've spent a lot of hours playing it. I want to play this game in the future. It's just there's a few things right now that are holding us all back for various different reasons. And I know there's still going to be a massive following that plays this game and enjoys the game, and there's nothing wrong with that. So just because some people are having issues with it and aren't enjoying it, it doesn't mean that you guys are wrong. I just wanted to make sure that it's kind of out there that I still like the Division. I'm just not playing it really right now.
Yeah. We're not trying to crap on the game or anything right now. It's just this is how we feel on it. I have no ill will towards the game.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think Arex's point at the beginning is something that I really subscribe to, because I personally really love this game. And the minute that I sort of saw it, I sort of liked the theme, and the minute I started playing it, I was like, yep, this feels good. But I'm actually fairly patient when it comes to waiting for something to kind of gestate, I guess you could say, in this day and age. Like, I really do expect that very large, very ambitious, sort of like genre-defining games do take a bit of time to really work themselves out, And so, like, Destiny is a perfect example, where it came out in vanilla and had a huge bang and everyone loved it, and then after a month everyone's like, okay, well, I'll stick with this, but like we need some stuff. And then Taken King came along and just completely turned everything on its head, and it was just an amazing expansion. And obviously something like Diablo is brought up a lot as well, where they've gone through this journey, this road to redemption, which everyone's sort of linking on Reddit at the moment, telling the story about how this game has improved over time. I think it's very much that sort of thing with The Division, where I love the bones of the game. I think the bones are very, very strong, and the potential for the game in future is just spectacular. But for now, obviously, there are quite a few things that the game needs to work through from a sort of metagame perspective, but also, I guess, specifically around exploits. And I guess I wanted to very quickly touch on that now, because I know a lot of you guys just mentioned it then. But can you guys think of a game where exploits have had this much of an impact on the way that a game plays and is perceived at the beginning of its life cycle? Like a major AAA kind of game.
Well,
I'm not talking some like little pokey free-to-play thing. I'm talking like a serious thing. Can you guys think of that?
Well, I can think. Yep. I mean, the Loot Cave is one that's often brought up. Literally within.
But do you think that
I hate to bring up the thing, because again, everyone hates the comparisons to Destiny, but it's telling when in the articles from Eurogamer or Kotaku, they start off with saying the guys over at Massive are having a Destiny Loot Cave level headache with so and so exploits. That's the thing that most recently will have defined it, I'd say.
Yeah, but
I'm probably liken it more to, in some ways, pushing Atheon off the edge, perhaps, because
that's a better example. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, because the Loot Cave is an interesting one. The Loot Cave is one of those things where, okay, it probably didn't work as intended, but there have been, like if you play MMOs and stuff, there are times when you can work the respawn timers in your favor. And like I think with me, I've definitely got like a different line. Like I don't mind farming if it's like farming through legitimate means. Like, for example, obviously min-maxing and farming in MMOs is all about trying to like get as much as you can in a shorter period of time. So provided you're doing it, so if you happen to know the respawn timers, if you can go to certain areas, leave areas and come back, I'm cool with that. Yeah, if suddenly it turns into an exploit where it's something you shouldn't actively be doing, that's when I draw the line.
Sure.
I think the reason why, sorry to interrupt, the reason why
go down.
It is similar to Destiny, but I think the main difference with any sort of Destiny exploits is that for the most part, it didn't affect PvP as much as Division's problems affect PvP. Like, you could have grinded the Loot Cave for, I don't care how many hours, 20 hours, 30 hours. At the end of the day, PvP is normalized, where a level 4 player has just as high of a chance of killing you as any other player, right? Everything is normalized. You could argue that for the whole pushing Atheon off the cliff and Templar off the cliff, something like the Vexed Mythoclast when it first came out was absolutely bonkers as a weapon, but that quickly got toned down, so it didn't become nearly as much of a problem, compared to the Division, where people are, able to like one-shot other people with regular guns, or
two-shot the APC.
Feels like, or what I've been reading,
Sure.
So it feels worse in that regards, because exploiting in one section leads to a significant advantage in another section, which some people
totally. But
annoying.
I think it's also a question of the intensity of the scale as well, in terms of like if you imagine like a new WoW expansion came out, and then some exploiters found a way to like farm every boss in that game and farm entire like gear sets from that within the first week, and that's the kind of comparison I draw in my mind. That would just be would completely destroy a tier of content
so quickly hot fixed it would make your head spin.
Exactly. That kind of thing where this has sort of been allowed to occur in a way. And I mean, what I mean by that is if you exploit in a Blizzard game, right, you are going to get banned. And that's it. It's going to get rolled back. You're going to get banned. Forget about it. Whereas here, I think in the Division, they're taking a very different approach where cheaters get only a 3-day ban at the beginning. And then they get, obviously, exploiters currently are not being punished at all. So you could have found an entire set of gear, and it looks like you are not going to get punished for that, and you are going to hold on to that. And I think that the overall impact of that approach is actually, I think, more damaging than the bugs themselves, right? Because every game breaks. Every game has problems. But it's a case of what does a developer do about that? And when in the case of Blizzard, we knew they would fix that problem, so it's okay, and you just sort of like sit patiently, and they'll ban them, and they'll fix it. But here we don't have that same certainty, and I think a lot of people are really sort of moving on from the game because they feel like, well, it's never going to get fixed. Everyone's going to be ahead of me now. I've missed the boat. Do you know what I mean?
Every change that they make to this, regardless of whether it's one of those quick fixes with the stuff they did to the Midas, or whether it is something like disabling the rewards, it's really kind of scary at the same time for the Division because you're setting precedents when you're doing this, right? So this is the way that your action is always going to be viewed from now on. You're creating the lens for people to look at this through. And obviously that can change, but man, it's such a scary position to have all of these things running around for Massive. It's just, wow, dude.
It is. So look, let's segue now because obviously we've exploits are there and they're disappointing, but there are other things to talk about as well. Let's say, for instance, in an ideal world, let's say that there are no exploits in the game right now. Big question, incursions. Would you guys be playing the incursion right now? Do you like it? What if not, why not? What are your general thoughts? Maybe Tash, do you want to kick us off on this one?
Yeah, I'll take it here. I wouldn't be playing them. I'd play them about 1 or 2 times. I've always been more of like a PvP player. So once I've beaten PvE content, I've beaten the boss, I can say, yep, I know how to beat it. I've done it. Unless it's the absolute best way to get gear, I don't like to play it over and over again, and especially if it's boring. So some of the raids in Destiny are some of the most well-done raids that I've played in a long time. Vault of Glass is great. King's Fall is pretty darn fun. And the Incursion feels so bland and boring. I cannot do it. I have to be playing with friends that are willing to joke and have fun, and we can converse the entire time, or I want to just turn the game off. It's so boring. It's wave after wave of, for the most part, tanky enemies or shotgunners rushing you. The challenge mode is... yes, you can do it, but for the most part, for most players, it's impossible because it's just so bullet spongy. They hit so hard. It's not even fun. You have to camp in a corner the whole time. So the Incursion alone doesn't feel like a fun experience. When you beat it, it's not like, yes, we did it. We figured out all the mechanics. It was awesome. It's just like, all right, well, we luckily survived this time. We didn't get one banged, and now let's go get some loot. So sure. I don't personally like it.
Yeah, Bife, you were sort of saying.
Yeah, no,
agreeing.
Tash, I was going to say, I got to echo everything you're saying there, but for me, a huge problem with this, and this goes back, and you compare this to any other kind of endgame activity in something like WoW or Destiny, whatever you have. The real problem for me when it comes to an incursion is the context of it. Now I know that it's going to be grounded in the Clancy universe and whatnot, and it's supposed to be ultra realistic as much as there is that weird divide where you've got guys who've got huge, ridiculous health bars who are in hoodies, but, that's whatever.
Yeah.
Let's take that point aside for a second, and let's just acknowledge that the context of the incursion, you say the enemies are boring, and yeah, there's a good reason for that. How many times is it going to be entertaining to shoot a guy with a huge health bar when he isn't some kind of god from the universe of WoW, or at least some kind of crazy soldier of the Horde, or when there isn't some kind of other context which gives you something which you can look past? For me, the Incursion was disappointing because I thought that even in the world of Tom Clancy, they could have done something more with this entire idea in the context of the world. So, to give you an idea, it's supposed to be an abandoned old water treatment plant, if I'm not mistaken, the area of Falcon Lost, right?
Yeah.
So, in that case, why not have some kind of mechanic where the water factors in? Something as simple as, yeah, sure, maybe the APC is one of the challenges you have to face, but maybe there's an area where you have to manage the water level in the room you're currently occupying. And if you don't, then your team simply drowns and it's a hard wipe.
Oh my god, that just...
So it's like
thinking about that is so sick. That would be awesome. Or even if you get it to 20%, your movement speed is reduced. Can you imagine how sick the mechanic would be?
It'd be like,
remove
And
some of
this-
the enemies,
yeah.
but just add mechanics. Make it a
Thank you.
challenge through
Chris,
things like
yes.
that.
yeah.
Now you see
yeah.
that is the huge problem, because the Division, there are some people who say that the Division has no potential for a world like that, and I'm one of those people to an extent, but I acknowledge that there is potential. The whole water thing that I just described is like one of the more basic things you could potentially do with this thing. I mean, we're sitting in the group with someone who's made a mechanic that sort of made it into a strike. Kappa Datto. But, it's like people can theory craft stuff like this, and it can make it into the world of the Division. It's not necessarily impossible to see these mechanics come around, but for me, the biggest limiting factor is that I'm not engaged by it at all in a narrative sense. Yeah, sure, it's the LMB. I understand the characters at play. I kill the Bliss, spoiler alert if you really care. Let's be honest, the Division story isn't, narratively speaking, that great, but
It is a step up. It is a step up from Destiny and Vanilla, but I hear you.
That I'll agree with.
yeah, that I'll
Yeah.
agree with. But no, I don't find a very good narrative reason to engage with. This is an APC that I'm killing. Whereas if I go into something in Destiny, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, okay, yes, this guy is also a massive health bar, but there is context because this is someone called Crota, son of Arekkz, who I've been told is a god. And it's like, okay, so we have reasons, and there's a context that allows more interesting mechanics to appear. My problem is, again, they do not ever feel like they're exploiting the full extent to which those mechanics could be put in there.
Sure.
Like,
And
I mean, even if they
how
threw
about-
in like okay, so one of the mechanics is they have those drones that fly out. Why don't they have a round where some big robot guys pop out? If they're going to be a big health bar, make it 2 or 3 big guys in drone or like exoskeleton suits that you need to focus fire. They're going to destroy you. Something like that even adds a little bit of like dynamics to it instead of the same old enemies over and over, wave after wave of just
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
dude,
boring.
you're so right. If every other wave is shotgunners, then it doesn't... Like, let's be honest, when you're playing Falcon Lost, I don't really pay much attention to which wave out of 15 I'm playing. When I look at Falcon Lost, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, so what's the health meter of the APC? Okay, so what's our progress in other ways? For me, the waves, if they could have something like what you're saying, Tash, like distinctive enemies or points at which, let's say you do get the APC down to a certain level of health, you have something that's even more distinctive than happens than just the drones.
Right.
Make that a thing. There is more. There is so much more that could be done.
So speaking of the mechanics, one guy who knows the mechanics very well is Arekkz, because Arekkz, you've actually finished it on challenge mode, if I'm not mistaken.
nice.
Yes. Yeah.
What do you think, man?
So I think I mean, I definitely agree to a certain extent. It's one of those things where, especially if you come from something like Destiny or World of Warcraft, it's always going to be difficult where if you're in a situation where you've got like alien races, sure, you can have a boss that's got 3 heads. It makes sense. That's cool. You're in a human universe, and admittedly, yes, we do have people where they have they have large health bars, but you're going to have a somewhat more limited experience. And I think one of the things that I try to sort of take home from it, not necessarily from Falcon Lost specifically, but something the developers said before launch, is that they want to make sure that every single update they launch is different. So like a DLC expansion won't necessarily always be, a Dark Zone expansion, one new mission, this, that, and the other. It won't be like a formulaic thing which basically gets added on every single time. I think they want to do something different every time. So I think one of the important things to bear in mind when thinking about this incursion is that, say, the one we get next month, I forgot what it's called, Broken Circle, isn't it?
Yeah.
I would imagine it's, obviously I don't know, but I would imagine that it's going to be something that won't necessarily be the same as this. I don't think it will necessarily be wave-based. I don't think it will necessarily be, vehicle-based or anything like that. So while we might necessarily like this particular one, and while if you look at like missions, you can say, all right, missions follow the same formula as do challenge mode missions. I feel like incursions aren't necessarily going to be restricted to waves. That being said, I feel like there are some interesting mechanics, or like very, somewhat limited, but I feel like there are some interesting mechanics that could be fleshed out. So, for example, the notion of, all right, I've got to fight an APC, which is effectively a tank. I'm obviously not going to do it with bullets. Planting explosives is a cool idea. I feel like the APC should have moved, definitely, because I feel like what's the point in having a mobile vehicle that can fire rockets that basically just sits and it's got mounted? Like, why? Yeah, I mean, why are there turrets defending a tank?
Who
Like,
brings an
surely the tank
APC
defends
to a water treatment plant? Who does
I mean,
that?
partly that, but also
How'd
who
you
brings an
get it
APC?
in there in the first place?
Talk
Down
about
the
bringing a
sewer.
tank to space. I mean, this is a whole other thing.
But who also brings a tank in
Deconstruct
there?
it piece by piece.
And then they're like,
bring
oh,
it
you know
through
what,
the
there's a
sewer.
tank. Yeah. Or they're like, oh, there's a tank and I need to defend this tank. that's already heavily armored by some turrets, which seems a bit weird. So yeah, there are some interesting things. I think it definitely. Also, the other thing as well is kind of to Mtash's point about it's about trying to sort of survive and kind of get lucky with the waves. So and if the tank moved, there would obviously be more strategy, because it would be like my strategy for challenge mode is you do the very first wave up at the top right, and then you go down mid, and you basically just stay mid, and you basically defeat the waves as they rush you. Whereas, of course, if the tank moved, you would then get to a point where it's like, all right, we have to rotate now. We can't stay mid because the tank will now suddenly start blasting, and we have to move. I mean, even something as simple as just making the tank move would have definitely made it slightly more interesting, and of course would have kept teams on their toes, right? Because it does now mean, kind of gets the point, at least using the strategy that I use, is that once you're down in the middle, provided you're watching both sides and provided you're placed in the right way, you're generally pretty safe. If you've got ammo and you've got a team there, then you can deal with the shotgun rushers, and then beyond that, it's just a case of hiding below the vents and picking things off gradually.
Yep.
So
very much.
I feel like the moving tank is definitely something that needs to happen. Definitely the idea that Bife had about factoring in things like the environment and water, that's something that would fit into the universe, would definitely make sense narratively, and would of course add like definitely a whole new kind of complexity to it. I think the important thing to bear in mind is that some people, especially I saw some news sites sort of doing it before launch, is that they were kind of likening this to a raid, and I said right from the start that
it's
an activity.
Not a raid. Yeah.
It's never going to be a raid. I feel like we might get them at some point, but an activity that has the penalty of restart on death would never be a raid, right? You wouldn't go through you wouldn't get to the end of King's Fall, you wouldn't get to the end of a World of Warcraft raid and be like, ha, you died, you got to go start again. It'd be like, no, that's not happening.
Child of the Crusader.
In that context, that would be like some sort of challenge modifier or bonus achievement. World of Warcraft had the Glory of the Immortal Raider, where if you went through an entire raid with nobody dying at any point, you got the title. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
That was the worst thing ever.
They didn't make you do that as a default.
Yeah.
And given that there's, 25, 30 people per raid, and all the raids have different challenges.
Totally.
I mean, you could go through like Nax and then lose someone to Hygen from one of the explosions on the floor, and it's just like, well, GG.
That's done.
And then you got started.
So Incursion's obviously bit hit and miss on that one. Let's say, for instance, that we loved the Incursion. We wanted to play it every week. We were farming loot. I kind of want to talk a little bit about the whole loot metagame. And, if the rest of the game was working perfectly and from a sort of a gameplay and mechanical perspective, it was really engaging, which, it partly is, but obviously it's got some gaps. But if all that was working, would the overall sort of metagame, the loot game, is that working? Is that good for you guys? Would that keep you playing? Because ultimately, that's a big reason why most people play a game like this. It is a looter. It's a looter shooter. But so is the loot system in its current form well designed? Is it working? Would you guys want to play it? So maybe, Bife, do you want to kick us off on this one?
I'd say that there's definitely good points to it, but for me, I look at the loot system currently, especially with the named high-ends, and what frustrates me is the fact that the perks don't feel like they stand out enough. Midas is, for example, a really unique weapon, or was prior to patch, still kind of is, because of the perks that it got, It had something where it really was impactful to your signature skill and the way that you therefore played the game. And admittedly, too powerful, but it had an impact. If I look at the Warlord now, and, some of the other stuff that's been added, Valkyria, for example, I don't really feel like there's enough to differentiate those named high-ends from the other standard high-end stuff. I mean, for me, that's the kind of huge problem that currently I have with the Division. I want to see them, I want to see them take the Clancy license and flesh that out with the kind of weapons you could have. You're a secret government organization, so it's not too out of the question they'd have technology and some gear that is outside of your typical military scenario. I mean, go ahead and why haven't they played with the concept of tasers, for example? There's a whole different set of weaponry you could potentially bring in as high-end stuff that goes beyond just, say, a typical weapon. And, they do some very interesting stuff. So the Historian, for example, the perks you can get on that, it's definitely good, and it has a great role for stopping people from running and creating all of these debuff status effects. But at the same time, I feel as though if they want to make these unique high-ends, for me, it's a real disconnect to have them not have perks that are distinctive enough. And again, that's probably my biggest gripe with the loot system right now, but assuming all of the exploits and stuff was, completely finished up, I'd sort of be okay with it. And that's me as a solo player, because, I mean, Nowadays, I'm actually not too short on high ends. I can get through the game, and it's still kind of tough doing only solo activities in order to get this stuff, but it's not impossible. So for me, I feel like it's sort of getting there, but there's a lot of lessons that do need to be learned. And I feel like whilst getting the loot isn't the problem, the loot that you get isn't necessarily always worth the reward in the work.
So one of the things that was added this time around were gear sets, which there were 4 gear sets, and some of them are pretty rad, some of them less so. Datto, have you sort of looked at those, and are you sort of chasing those, or like what do you think about those gear sets?
Yeah, I mean, I think gear sets are always going to be cool, because it gives you something to go strive for. It's like, I really want the cool looking set, or I want the nice bonuses or whatever. So that I don't mind existing on its own, Would it be nice to have other things to, like, I don't think there's any like item level 240 high ends, are there?
No, there are not.
Okay. So, I mean, it would still kind of be nice to have as many options as you can, but I think gear sets are totally fine. And to a point, I kind of wish Destiny will get involved with them if they can make them work.
Oh, yeah.
But no, I don't have anything against gear sets at all. I think, if they kind of lend themselves to playing a certain type of style. If you do want to try that crazy high electronics build, there's a gear set for you. If you want that really high survivability, there's a gear set for you. It's a set that you can go actively look for, and it allows you to play in the way that you actually want to play it, as opposed to with high ends where it's like, okay, well, I got to go find the blueprint, and then I got to get the nice roll on it, and then, it doesn't always work out as smoothly, whereas the set gear can be more tailored towards, if you want to do a certain build, you can do that. Sure. So that's, I think they're a good addition to the game.
I guess the other thing the other big change they made with the loot metagame this time around was the 100% drop chance for high-end weapons, or high-end items, I should say, of named enemies. So, Arekkz, has this pushed you more into the dark zone? Are you farming more now in that space, or how has that sort of changed the way that you play, if at all?
I mean, I spend most of my time in the dark zone regardless, so I was kind of, if anything, it probably made me go in there a little bit more. I think it's interesting because it's somewhat devalued higher ends now, because it gets to the point where, I kill bosses, I kill player. Like, if I kill a boss, it drops a high end. If I kill a player, invariably they've killed a boss, they drop a high end. If I open a chest, it's a guaranteed high end drop as well. It got to the point where high ends were, it used to be, if you saw a high end drop, it would be that gold beacon, and you would be, you could be in DZ06 in the middle of a really dangerous place. If you see that gold beacon, you're like, I have to go and see what it is. I might die, but I have to see it, because it was so rare, right? And okay, maybe before they were a little bit too rare, maybe you would never see them. I'm always of the mind that I feel I like things if they're super rare, right? I think of like in World of Warcraft as well, you had, I forget the actual names, but above, like, there were like the orange weapons that were like ultra rare, like the
legendaries.
Yeah, if you see one guy in a tower with that legendary weapon, you're like, holy crap, I need to see that kind of thing. So I'm all in favor of things being rare, but it got to the point now where I've now started, if I see a high-end drop, I don't really go over and check it, because I'm like, it's not going to be better than what I've got, and I've started leaving it behind. It was already bad before with superior items, where I would just run past purples, and I'll be streaming, and people will be like, why are you not going to go and check that? I'm like, it's not going to be good. I'm not going to check it. And now I'm running past high ends.
Wouldn't you say that eventually you're going to get to that point anyway, though? Like, I got to that point in Diablo where I was like, yeah, I'm just going to skip over all these yellows and whatever. But I guess the difference with Diablo is, whenever you got a set piece or you got a legendary, it was always kind of like, it was a cool thing, especially after they did Loot 2.0, which is what I think the Division sort of is going through / still needs to go through. I guess they kind of went through. They kind of learned, like, okay, we need to Diabloify this right now. We got to put in Loot 2.0 because the loot that people are getting is just, it's not fun, right? We got to let people do their own thing and be able to get these cool items. I think the problem with the Division, though, is that you have the PvP side to it, so you can't create these over-the-top ridiculous items that allow you to one-shot people in the Dark Zone. But I would say that eventually that's going to become a problem anyway. Like, I was already skipping over purple items for the most part. High ends I definitely still take a look at, but now I kind of treat in the same way as purples. But when I wasn't fully geared, when I was just hitting level 30, I saw purple. I was like, oh, purple! Oh my god, purple!
Sure,
and then,
sure.
And then
I saw my
begins
first
the
high
most
end.
tense 2 minutes of your life as you
Yeah,
get to
and
the
then-
extraction and wait.
And then you
Yeah.
see, your first high end while you're still in purple. It's like, oh, I got high end. Oh god. And so I think in any game, you're just eventually going to get to that point. It
Yeah,
just
that's
it's
true.
just how, like, you're a very hardcore player compared to someone like me. I don't have any earned set gear yet. I bought a couple of pieces, but if I saw a set gear piece drop, I'm like, oh, set gear, oh, so
Yeah.
cool.
Totally.
So it's a balance. It's trying to please those hardcore players, but also it's mainly trying to please the casual players, but you need a way to entertain the hardcore players as well. So it's
Yeah, I mean, it definitely
that
adds to
kind
that.
of depends on perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely like, I mean, at least for me, I appreciate I have a slightly skewed experience because I have been playing it pretty much non-stop. I am I've managed to maintain my position like at the top with like gear score and whatnot, so I can kind of compete with people in the dark zone and whatnot. So for me, I feel like it's great because it does mean that, like, if you see someone, especially when we used to go rogue, it would be the point where me and my team is like, if you see someone with a yellow handbag, we have to take them out, right? And it's like invariably now it means that they will be dropping. That's yeah, they will be dropping high ends, which is kind of cool because, of course, I mean, again, we tend to leave it for them so they can go and pick it back up. But the point is, it definitely adds that, and I think it's nice because there are a lot of people that I have seen in my videos and like on forums that have been like, I don't really want to go into the dark zone because it's so difficult and whatnot. But at least they do know that if they can pop in, they can kill a single boss, they're guaranteed something. So I think it's definitely good like that. One of the things I think I do like about the system, and I found this throughout the whole time, when I was level 1, level 10, level, whatever it is that the nice thing with Division's loot system is that there's a lot of the time it seems to be quite rewarding. While it might not necessarily be a massive improvement, it's not one of those kind of systems where there is one single gear set or one single armor piece or armor path you have to go to get to endgame gear. So I could be running through, as I'm leveling up, I'm picking up new things, and it might only change my stats by 10 or 100. But each time I pick something up, it's like for a good chunk of my playtime, it's had some sort of value, right? And I think that's one of the nice things that, especially, I think a lot of players, had some frustrations with this, and Destiny, myself included, is that you kind of get to the point where endgame, well, for a while until recently, there was one, maybe two paths to endgame gear, right? If you want to be max light, you would either have to do the raid, or as of recent, you would do Trials of Osiris or Iron Banner. And whereas in the Division, like initially, prior to gear sets, there was no notion of this is your end game set. It's just, as long as your stats are there, some people have got 100k health, some people have got 70k health, some people have got 200k DPS, some people have got 50k DPS. So I feel like, I feel like the loot system is quite rewarding, and you can definitely pick something up and make something of it a lot of the time, which is nice.
True. So, segueing a little bit now, I just want to have a bit of a conversation around PvP in this game. So again, assuming that everything worked perfectly and there were no hackers, and the game was sort of like where it should be, is there actually PvP in this game? Because I've heard a lot of people say that PvP in the Dark Zone isn't quite what it should be. So Mtashed, have you done much PvP in the Dark Zone? What do you think of it?
I did a bunch, but it's just honestly constant griefing no matter how you look at it. So you're going to run into a whole bunch of situations, even if you're a solo player who's good, well gear, you're either going to dominate people. I have videos out there where I 1v4, 1v6 consistently. I mean, yes, I use Survivor Link, but if you're well geared, in most situations, there's always going to be a point where you're in a dark zone, no one can compete with you. Then there's going to be situations where you enter a dark zone, whether you're solo or you're in a group, and you're going to be up against people that you can't compete with. And there's not many opportunities for there to be an even playing field. One of the other things, too, is there are so many people that are focused on grinding and killing PvE enemies that they don't even want to participate in PvP. So then you're running into the situation where you want to go out, you want to PvP, and you can't find any rogues to kill. And now if you want to go rogue, in a lot of occasions, you're griefing other players that don't even want to participate, and for the most part, probably aren't geared, so you kill them. If you're going into the PvP area and you have a build that's focused on killing other players, most of the time other people aren't. They don't have maxed out armor builds. They have things like damage to elites. They have things that are going to help them in their PvE grind, so you just dominate them in that way because you have a build focused on killing people. So it feels like there's so many situations where it just doesn't work, and there are people that don't even want to participate in it, and you're the minority if you want to play PvP. So,
Bife, I know you run solo most of the time. Have you spent much time in the Dark Zone solo, and how have you found that?
I found that the time that I've had, at least when it comes to the PvP aspect of things, has at least held a really high bar for tension in terms of the actual PvP gameplay. When I come across a group of rogues coming out of the building, there is no other moment in gaming, I think, that has matched the level of, oh, okay, so it's on now, you know, in a true PvP context. But at the same time, Tash brings up a really good point about builds. And it makes me kind of wonder, the question should really be asked. Yes, the Dark Zone is this really interesting PvE, PvP hybrid area, but should there really be some kind of dedicated arena for this stuff? I kind of feel as though there should be. And it makes me question whether there shouldn't also be some kind of vague range of normalization for this. Because especially seeing as the weapons that you get, they can actually be found across all different rarities. So, I mean, I could pick up a Worn, technically a white level Navy MP5, and at the same time, I could also have a high-end Navy MP5. For me, I think that's kind of the obvious way in which the Division has to go if it wants to flesh out its PvP more. But even then, you have to ask the question, how popular is third-person player versus player combat going to be? I think you have to then emphasize the skills in the game there more, and that's what I think would differentiate it. So, for me as a solo player, though, it's been at least tense, but I wouldn't say I'd call it fun 100% of the time either.
Yeah.
I'm just, yeah.
It's a really interesting idea, that whole gear normalization thing. It's actually one I subscribe to quite a bit, because I think if you want a truly competitive playing field, which I think is what we all want when it comes to any competitive game that we want to play long term, then, you know, we want a level playing field as the starting point, you know. So, I mean, Datto, have you done much PvP yourself? I mean, what are your sort of general thoughts on how all this works?
I have done very limited amounts of PvP. You know, most of my PvP has come from my teammates just going ADD and like, there's a rogue, let's go get him right now. And we just drop everything that we're doing and we go chase down the rogue. But even then, it just, most of the time it ends up in just chasing people as opposed to actually fighting people. Because no one wants to die, right? True. So it just ends up being a chase. But, you know, I can remember one instance where, and honestly, only one instance where we had like a really good back and forth going for like, you know, probably a good 15 minutes or so, just chasing people down, good gunfights and all that kind of stuff. And when the playing field is even, it's great. It's a very tense experience. It's very strategic. There's a lot of, you know, tactical movement and ability usage and stuff like that. So when it can be at its best, it's fun, but it just doesn't get to that point enough times. And you know, it kind of goes along with the whole build thing. If you want to go in specifically to kill people, then you're probably going to be doing that without much hesitation. You know, and partly the reason why I don't really do that is because I know most of the people in the Dark Zone are farming bosses, and I know whenever I'm farming bosses, the last thing I want to be doing is dealing with random people going rogue on me. So I just feel like an asshole when I do it. Which is why I never do it in the first place. But if there was a dedicated zone where I could go do that and there was no risk and I could just go PvP for the sake of PvPing, that would be, you know, that would be nice. Sure. But yeah, I don't PvP because it's a treat others how you want to be treated kind of thing, where I'm just like, I know that if I did what I just did to that guy, if it happened to me, I would be so mad. And I'm not the kind of person who gets too much enjoyment out of getting other people mad. I just feel like really, really bad. So I just don't do it.
You are definitely in the minority on that one, man. Definitely.
Another good argument for normalization, man. Another good argument.
Yeah, well, exactly. So, obviously, a lot of different thoughts and discussions about sort of the strengths and weaknesses of the game at this point. Just want to sort of check in with everyone before we leave and just sort of say, so what are your plans going forward? You know, like, are you going to be playing the game? Like, are you going to sort of just completely shelve it? Are you going to sort of log in and do your dailies? Like, how are you going to be approaching the game for the next little while? So maybe we can start with Bife.
Well, I think that for the time being, this is nothing to do with the game itself, but this is my busy life as is. I can't actually put too much time into the Division, but I'm certainly keeping a hold on it. I'm going to check up and see what happens with all of the future updates. And, I mean, I echo what we said at the very beginning. We may have sort of thrown a lot of critique out at this game in the last, God, how long has it been? 50 minutes, hour? But we're all sitting here as people who love this game, and we want it to do well. So, I'll keep around. I'll make sure that I've always got my character rearing and ready to go, but I don't know if that will include things like being geared up, because right now, for me, the Division needs to evolve before it's going to be a game that I can enjoy again.
Sure. Datto, what do you think, man?
I mean, I've wanted to get back into playing the Division. I've neglected it for a while, and a lot of people on my channel have been asking, where's Division stuff? And it's partly what I mentioned earlier is, Destiny update came out and I haven't had time, and I've been learning that it can be quite difficult to cover 2 games at that elite level in the way that I kind of want to do it. So, the Division, Destiny with their update kind of took priority. But as things slow down and maybe I get a little more time on my hands, I would like to go back to the Division and give it another shot. It's kind of same thing with Destiny. Like, yeah, if you're not enjoying the game, come back when there's an update and see if you like it then, right?
Sure.
There's no problem with just waiting. You don't have to quit forever. The game does not delete your characters when you stop playing. Everything stays there. So I am totally fine with just waiting. And, if I get some more free time, if my friends want to get back into it again, if they improve everything, if they fix the exploits, and they make it a more fun experience or an experience that I actively want to go do, then I'll hop right back in. I got no problem with that. People denouncing the game as if they can never play it again or it'll never get better is ridiculous. But for now, I will do what I can to try and get back into it. But it's definitely not as high of a priority as I thought it was going to be at this point in the game's life cycle.
All right, so Mtashed, what do you think, buddy?
I'm kind of on the same page as the other guys. It's not a job. No game is a job. If you're not enjoying it, move on, do something else, and come back later if you enjoy it again, And with the Division, I think early on I wanted to make guides to try and help people out that don't understand why crit damage and crit chance might be good. I covered that stuff. It applies forever now to the end of Destiny, so rehashing a lot of those guides that I've made in the past isn't really necessary. New guns, new gear will come out, but a lot of the main principles of the best stats to get on gear stays pretty damn close to the same every single patch, every single update. So I'm probably going to put it away for a bit. I'm going to let the people that want to grind it out, and then hopefully right before the next expansion, I can find some friends that are really geared, can easily do challenge mode, and hopefully, get a little carry to the loot, grind it out for a bit, and then kind of catch up when hopefully they've fixed a lot of the issues in the game.
Sure. And finally, Arekkz, I suspect you're going to keep plugging away at it.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I still, as I say, I still play it daily. I have basically a DZ farming route that we run, my team, every single day. We run through, get some Division tech, do some Phoenix credit farming. I might not, if I compare my playtime, say, in a week it came out, which was, something ridiculous, like 8-10 hours a day versus now, I can probably jump on and do everything I need in a couple of hours. So I feel like the game for me is in a good place right now. Well, I say in a good place. I appreciate there's a lot of issues, exploits, bugs, but for me personally, the game is in a place where it now fits into my schedule, right? I can log on every single day. I can do my farming run, get my materials, get my Phoenix credits, and then be happy for the day. I can jump on and do some rogue stuff if I want to go rogue and mess around in the dark zone. My hope for the future, or hope to at least kind of going forward, is that I appreciate, obviously we don't know yet how massive we're going to deal with exploits and glitches. It's my impression they probably won't get punished. So I think the best case scenario, if that happens, is that we can kind of weather the storm until the next expansion, because of course the next expansion has a gear score limit for the next Incursion. So all we can hope is that by the time that happens, that will kind of like level the playing field, because of course people will have, I appreciate it's harder to gear up now, but if people have then suddenly, anyone that's exploited now might be there already, fine, that's them. Anyone else that hasn't, can still play legitimately every single week, get their weekly rewards, gradually get to the point, and then next month when they drop the next Incursion, hopefully by that time everyone's around 220, they're back on an even playing field, and then if they can basically, what they need to do for the next one is smash it out of the park, launch it with ideally no bugs, no glitches, so then everyone has to play it legitimately, and then everyone continues leveling at a regular pace, and then hopefully it will restore a lot of order to the game, right? It means the Dark Zone will be back to being as balanced as it can be. it means everyone else will gear up in a, you know, relatively stable way. But yeah, I mean, for me, going forward, I'm definitely still enjoying it, definitely still playing it. So yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm very much in the same boat. I'm not playing it this week, but I definitely next week I'll be back on it. And, you know, I'm really enjoying it. I think the bones are great. And I'm invested enough in it in terms of like how much I enjoy the license and my character and the overall experience that I will keep sort of putting up with those shortcomings, sort of in the knowledge or in the hope that things do improve. Because I really do think they will. You know, I mean, like, it's just, you've got a big developer or at least a big publisher, Ubisoft, who have put a lot of money into this. They are heavily incentivized to make this a game that we all love, you know, and I really think that if we give it a bit of time, it will eventually get to that point. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I don't mind sort of patiently waiting for that. But yeah, that's sort of that's the discussion for today, guys.
I mean, actually, one more thing, just to kind of, sorry, just to echo kind of what you're saying there as well, is I think, yeah, I mean, to that point, I did the same thing with Destiny, right? Is that I am very happy to kind of sit back and say,
yeah,
I feel like this game has massive potential, and I feel like it can be the game we want it to be. Obviously, I'm also in a fortunate position. You know, I speak to the developers quite a bit anyway. I know how passionate they are about the game, and we've seen how, you know, they I mean, even through thick and thin, right? The game's in a bit of a weird state right now. Yet they continue to stream. They continue to try and communicate as much as they can with the community. So they are obviously, you know, they're not hiding away. They're not being like, oh crap, there's glitches. We're gonna stop streaming. We won't see you guys for 2 weeks. You know, they're still there, come rain or shine. They're still working really hard. They're super passionate about the game, and they are trying. You know, we can see by some of the patches that they do have the capacity to fix some things super quickly, and other things they're obviously trying to fix as quickly as they can. So I feel like it definitely has the potential to become the game we want it to be. I just feel like, yeah, I mean, in my position, I am definitely happy to sit it out, support it, be patient. You know, I will, you know, I'm not blind to things, but at the same time, I'm also going to support them and be like, you know what, I can see this happening. So yeah, definitely.
Totally. Cool. All right. Well, look, guys, thank you so much. It was really great having so many sort of, you know, just obviously like YouTubers, whatever, but like people with really great perspectives on the games that we love. So thank you all for like taking the time to sort of participate in this discussion. Really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone for listening. All of our contact details or our channel information are going to be available in descriptions below. So check those out. And yeah, hopefully we'll be able to have more of these chats in the future. But for now, guys, thanks very much for listening. And take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.